Hey y'all, you know what's crazy? One of the most powerful, iconic, culture shifting characters in all of Marvel, a literal goddess, has been treated in the movies like she's just there to just stand in the back and make it drizzle. We're talking about why Hollywood keeps playing in Storm's face on this episode of We Got Time Today. Hey friends, welcome back to We Got Time Today, the podcast where we break down the news, the culture, and the conversation. I'm your host, Will, and today we're summoning the storm, literally. We're talking about Ororo Munroe, aka Storm, the mutant goddess, the leader of the X-Men, and the blueprint for superhero excellence. And we're going to talk about why fans like me, and I'm sure yourself, have been big mad that Hollywood has never given her the epic portrayal she deserves. But before we summon the lightning and bring the thunder, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single episode of We Got Time Today. Now, I will be sharing my screen, so if you are listening to this on Spotify or any of your other favorite podcast platforms, please make sure you head over to YouTube to see the visuals. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right, Storm, Goddess, leader, icon, but why does Hollywood keep playing in her face? I think this is a question a lot of fans have been asking, right? And so I think it's a really good time to talk about my personal opinion as to one, why Storm is an icon, why she means so much to like fans like myself. I think it is also a testament to the fact that we have to ask ourselves why they keep playing in her face. Now there's no shade thrown to obviously Alexander Shipp or Holly Berry for their portrayal in, the movies. It is mostly based on the writers, right? And the producers of the films who give them a certain script and they have to execute it. So I think it is unfortunate that the Storm character always gets played in the background. And I think it was really just time to talk about it because I think it is something that a lot of fans have been asking. So here we go. Now, let's talk about the origins of Storm. So, let's go way back to 1975. Marvel drops giant size X Men #1, and boom, Storm makes her debut, created by Lin Wayne and Dave Cockrum. Now, this wasn't just another white spandex wearing hero. No, no, no. Storm was a black woman from Kenya. She was worshipped as a goddess. She descended from a line of African priestesses. Her hair, white, iconic, right? Her eyes glowed white when she used her powers. Mother. Her presence, commanding. And the great thing about this is she wasn't a sidekick. She was the moment. And Cockrum's design, chef kiss, right? It was a mix of regal goddess and superhero chic. The flowing cape, the tiara, the thigh-high boots, and then obviously we had the 1980s Storm. And Storm said, you know what? No, I'm cutting all this shit off. And she grabbed a mohawk, put on some leather, and she ran with this punk rock style, which I thought was iconic. And so we have to say, listen, Storm is versatile. She goes from being this ethereal queen to don't mess with me or and I will kick your ass. Right? And so I think that is why we love Storm so much. We can all see ourselves in an era of Storm. And so speaking of eras, I do want to talk about that. So we had Dave Cochrum's design. And so that was one of the first introductions that we saw to Storm. So we had her in this kind of sexy outfit, which I also thought was really interesting. This look could be, provocative. But I think it was really great to say you own the skin you're in. She is powerful, she's commanding. It is sexy, but it's not overly sexy to the point where it is overshadowing the fact that she's such an amazing character. And I think that's really one, I think that's really smart. Two, to play on this like sex appeal of a character and also say that, black women can be sexy. That is a topic for another day. And we'll get into that too. But I just think it is really interesting for him to do that because she's a goddess. The contrast between her white hair and her that brown skin, amazing. Like, can we get into it? Right? Does she look amazing? But speaking of her versatility, here is Storm throughout the ages of the eras. So obviously we have the first introduction that we have with Storm, which was the black. And then she said, I'm cutting all this hair off and I'm just going to rock a mohawk and I'm going this punk era vibe, punk rock. Thought that was cool, right? Still edgy, still commanding. I think it takes a lot of balls for you to chop over that hair and just rock a mohawk. So more power to you, Storm. And then we have the iconic, like the one from the animated series, the all white outfit. I think when we talk about Storm, that is the outfit that a lot of us we know it's like synonymous with Storm. It's like that one, right? From the animated series. The all white one, just crisp, clean, with the two red X's on the chest. And she like uses it as, like what is like a walkie-talkie kind of thing. Amazing. It was so good. And then, we have the goddess era where she is like ethereal. She goes back to, her African roots and they worshiping her as a goddess. And also that is where, that time in which she marries Black Panther, which also great, right? They didn't whitewash her character and have her date outside her race, which is not a problem with interracial dating. But you have two royals coming together. You know how much power that is? Like, what? And then what I love, obviously, you have the Krakoa era up there on the top, and then with the Met Gala, right? X-Men Red, which I thought was also fun. That you have that, it's kind of edgy, so it's a mix of that first costume plus the punk rock Storm, and they kind of meshed it together, which is really great. It's very like fashion forward. And then we have the revival from X-Men '97, which we saw the original costume come back. And I thought that was really smart to really just own who we know Storm to be and then put that in the new version of the animated series. And I thought that was just like such a love letter to all the fans out there. And then we got the old suit back when she had her transformation. What was that in Life Death? We have that when she lost her powers and she got her powers back and she became like the goddess again. So again, I think it's just really just a testament to like the storm of just the mini generation, and all of us can see ourselves in one of these versions of Storm, which I think is cool. So I personally like the all white costume. What about y'all? Drop in the comments. What is your favorite Storm? I will love to like to see the comments and see if you agree with me. I think that's also the best era of Storm, but I might just be biased because that's just my fave. Now let's talk about why Storm is so important. Like obviously I have time to talk about Storm through this whole entire episode. So like why am I making it such an important thing to do? Mm, It's a big deal. She wasn't just powerful, she was respected. She even beat Cyclops in hand-to-hand combat without powers, which is really impressive. Right? She wasn't written as a stereotype. She was written as regal, intelligent, empathetic, but also a straight-up warrior. So, speaking of warrior, obviously we know the iconic battle that she had with Callisto, and she became the leader of the Morlocks. The symbolism in there is really important. It's because the Morlocks were the outcasts. Obviously, X-Men, there's a whole like political like undertone to the X-Men, mutants and being oppressed and racism, nationalism, and all that. But I think it's really interesting that Storm, in particular, became the leader of the Morlocks because you have an African American like superhero, a woman at that, right, becoming the leader of another like outcast group with her technically being an outcast as a mutant, but also layered on top of being black and then layered on top of, being a woman. I just think that is just amazing. And she beat Callisto with no powers. So like, let's really get into it. We all know when Storm whipped that ass. Like, we did. I think everybody was like screaming at the television. I remember being a little kid watching that on the TV and yelling, like, yes, Storm, get it. Kick her ass. Obviously not cursing because I was a little kid and, my grandma would beat my ass if I was cursing. So no, not cursing, but that's just me now projecting as my little self. And then also, like I said earlier, she did beat Cyclops. I think it's really interesting because obviously Cyclops is like the leader of the X-Men, quote unquote. That's debatable. I don't know who to say that he really is a leader because Cyclops has made some really questionable decisions. I mean, anyways, we can get into that. That's a whole episode for a whole nother day. But I digress. So here, right, obviously Storm again is showing that she is not just like a mutant. She is not just somebody to be in the background. No, she's a leader and she also is a warrior too. So her hand-to-hand combat is second to none. Hollywood, even with all of that, still decided to play in her face. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm throwing shade to Halle Berry and I'm throwing shade to Alexandria, and I'm not. Again, this is no shade to the actresses that did what they could with what was given to them, because at the end of the day, they were just the actresses using and being the vessels to the producers, like, script. They have no control over what's happening. They only could do the best of what was given. Now, we all know in the first X-Men movies, Halle Berry had this accent, this African accent. Do you know what happened to a toad when it's struck by lightning? You know, the same thing that happened to everything else. Horrible accent, but she did what she could. It was really bad. It was it was bad. I think I kind of did it worse, like with the reenactment, but you get what I mean. It wasn't the greatest, but at least she tried, right? And then obviously she came back in X2, chopped her hair off, and then there was no accent. Okay. So like where did that accent go? So that was also a questionable like decision on their part. And then we see that her hair gets shorter and shorter and she just gets like these weird hairstyles. I don't remember which either it was X2 or X3. I'm not on the last hand. I'm not really sure when Hank was like, "Oh my God, oh look what you did with your hair," and she's like, "Oh thank you," as like that was like a storyline, but okay. And then she came back in Days of Future Past, and she had like a really shortcut, but we can see that they made some questionable like choices with her design and not staying true to the actual like the storm that we remember. But Halle Berry did what she could with the Storm character. And then we have, with there's a lot of criticism and a lot of hate thrown at Halle Berry as if she could have done more, but she could have if they would have given her more with the script. I'm sure Halle Berry, as a fan of Storm, was thinking just like we were thinking, like, why? But the elephant in the room is, or should I say lightning bolt in the room? But that was just me being cheesy. When Fox's X-Men movies came out, we found out that Halle Berry was cast as Storm, and the hype was real. I mean, Halle Berry is stunning, she's talented, and she could have brought all of that energy to the goddess herself. But again, no shade to Halle Berry, but the writing did her. Storm barely got any lines, her backstory was non existent, and they completely ignored her role as a leader of the X-Men. Sometimes she was just literally just there. Like, okay, Storm, go make it cloudy for 3 seconds. And then, like I said, the first movie had that Kenyan accent, and then the second movie, it was gone. It just vanished, like Fox's care for the X Men franchise. Fans weren't just mad, we were all very disappointed. Because in the comics, Storm could literally control the weather on a planetary scale. She could end droughts. She could throw a hurricane at you from 200 miles away. She could literally alter the planet's ecosystem. But in the movies, she just electrocuted one soul and called it a day. Now, the missed opportunities were huge. No deep dive into her Kenyan origins, no goddess worship, no leadership arcs, right? No, not even no romance with Black Panther, or even acknowledgement of her incredible personal story. I think that is why the fans are begging the MCU to get it right. Right? Give us the full power set. Give us the regal energy. Give us the queen. I mean, am I wrong? I don't think so. So, then we have the revival. I want to talk a little bit about why the X Men 97 revival was so important because you can tell it was a love story to Storm. It was. It was really just doing all of like the disservice, like and putting all of that together and bottling it up and putting it on like the TV screen for us again. And so this was, yeah, it was a little darker than the original comics, and I think that's the point to show that hey, yes, this is what happened after that last episode, after the animated series finished. Here's what would happen like after that. And I think it was really good follow up. So, why is she iconic? Let me remind you that Storm is that girl. She beat Cyclops for leadership without powers. She once created a blizzard to stop an army. She ended droughts across continents. She defeated Callisto in the Morlock's tunnel in one of the most badass fights in comic history. And let's not forget, she became the queen of Wakanda when she married Black Panther. The movies could have pulled off any of it, but nope. They had her out there making it rain like she was in a DJ Khaled nightclub. No shit. So now, Storm doesn't just control the weather, she is the storm. She's a leader, a goddess, a queen, and one of the most important superheroes in comic history. Hollywood just needs to stop playing in her face. MCU, I'm looking at you. We're ready for a Storm that's as powerful and majestic as she's always been in the comics. So, my question is should she get a solo movie? And if so, would you watch it? What would the title be? And what would the story be? Would it be like an origin story, like Wolverine Origins? Or would it be just, her fighting the Morlocks and becoming leader of the Morlocks? Do we see the fight with Callisto? Do we see Storm over the eras? What would it be? Drop in the comments. I'd love to hear. And so, if you loved this deep dive into Ororo Munroe, drop your favorite storm moments in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe because we got time today. Every episode, every truth, no apologies. Until next time.